Hello and welcome to Dem Bos Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and I will be your guide throughout this journey on the show. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices will be amplified as we share our stories. Trans men of color are not monolithic. What that means is our journeys are not the same. We come from different backgrounds. We have different stories, family relations, chosen family, and most of all, we have different transition journeys. Visibility equals possibility. I like to say that all the time. We like to highlight on this show trans men of color businesses and entrepreneurs, parents, athletes, survivors, and many other issues and topics that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. Dem Bos Podcast is not only a platform to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, listening, and sharing the show. So when you say realness, you want to explain really quickly what realness is?
Yeah, realness, it's like I think my brain immediately went to Dorian Gray, is the ability to blend. But for queer trans folks or LGBTQ plus folks, it's basically what you're doing is a particular type of gender performance where you are embodying the character, like whatever the category calls for. That's usually an archetype of society, of cis straight society. So, I mentioned I walked butch realness. So for me, I was a butch lesbian. The idea was, can you pantomime the performance of a boy, of a cis boy, straight boy? And since I was bringing it like a thug or French little thug, I had to embody that aesthetic. And so it comes down to all these details of the way, truly, it's a form of theater, like I think that's kind of been one of the cool findings that when I've like really sat with like, what is ballroom? Like going to the origins. And mind you, I'm going deep. Like we're talking like African diasporic history, European history. Like I'm really going deep into like, what are the origins of these things? And ballroom is its own particular type of theater. And in many ways, it's almost like a form of community theater in the sense that with the categories, like you got to come ready with this appearance, this look, this story you're telling through your costuming, through your movement, through your dance, through whatever you're doing, and that's part of the magic of it. But yeah, for realness, it's us portraying archetypes. And there's so many. You got executive realness, you got pretty boy realness is a very popular one. There's a variety of them. And then of course for trans women too, femme queen realness, they'll have like their categories there too, whether, same thing. So.
Yeah. So I want to tie all of this together. So you mentioned about storytelling. And so obviously like being in the ballroom scene, that's a form of storytelling. But you're an author and you wrote Undeniable, the history of voguing, ballroom, and how it changed my life. And so I think what my question to you is that is a version of trans storytelling. And so how important is storytelling for us in our communities?
I mean, we were just talking about this. And it's how it changed my life and the world. Don't forget
and the
that.
world, yes, and the world, yes, yes.
Yeah, and I haven't written it yet. Obviously, it's in progress, so there is a pub date coming soon. Obviously, I will definitely let you know, and hopefully come back to promote it. But yeah, this, I think what's interesting is, like I said, I started out being interested in the oral history. I just wanted to go to the source. I was like, I'm sick of other people talking about ballroom. Let's go to the people who are actually there, who are on the floor, who are walking, who are turning it. And to me, that was a way of reclamation, of like reclaiming the narrative and just like truly hearing from the people who oftentimes don't get to be heard, who aren't listened to, who aren't taken seriously. So one, there's that. Two, I think what was interesting is I originally wanted to do like a history book, like a straight up A to Z. And then I remember that contact I had, Alessandra, shout out to her, she's amazing, at HarperCollins. She was like, we need a guide to walk us through what all of this stuff is. And you're the perfect guide because you're somebody who straddles both lines of being an insider to the culture, but then obviously like you have this life outside. And you could also articulate what these things are. Because I think that's also a big thing is like, when you're like, what ballroom is, but you don't know how to describe it or like, what is this thing? It's really interesting because a lot of people have that. I mean, even for me to like develop a proper like definition, ballroom in many ways is kind of amorphous. It's very slippery. But at the same time, it's like when you see it, you know it. And there are also parts of it that are unique to the culture itself or specifically come from the culture itself. So, like, for example, this idea of peels and reveals. It's a very ballroom thing. I wouldn't say it's exclusive to ballroom, but there's like a very ballroom element. So, like, a peel is basically when you have a costume, and let's say you have like a secret costume underneath it, and you pull a string, and then poof, like, the hat becomes a dress, and then it's like, oh, you pull another string, and the dress becomes, there's a jacket that you didn't know was there, like those kinds of things, or you're wearing, a huge gown and then you twirl and then all of a sudden it comes out and the gown turns into a pair of shorts and, now you have like two looks in one. Like that's a peeling as in like literally taking clothes off or whatever, and a reveal. And that's like a very, very, very ballroom thing. So anyway, that being said, you and I were just talking before we had logged on about this idea of trans storytelling and how important I think this podcast is of just like trans folks talking to ourselves. People are constantly talking around us about us in the mainstream media or on social media, and rarely are we able to be the narrators of our own stories or say what we want to say or share our thoughts. And I feel like even more so for trans mask folks, even more so for Black trans mask folks. So it's like you're doing like super important work. And I know I was saying to you earlier that, there's kind of this trend right now. There's a lot of LGBTQ folks doing archival work, really looking for us in the archive. Where are we? Who are we? Where do we come from? And I think it's beautiful. It's so important, especially since we're not on the history books. We're not being taught in schools in the way that we should be. And I'm thinking also a lot, I must say, there's this person, their name escapes me right now, but they're doing a really cool, like, doc look at Moi Renee. And it is so beautiful because for folks who know, Moi Renee they were that person who had the song Miss Honey, Miss Honey. This is what Beyonce sampled on Renaissance. But Moi Renee was like a performer in New York. And, to see this person do this beautiful deep dive into their story is so important because, like, right, people, when I said, Miss Honey, you recognize the Renaissance song, but, did you know the deeper history that there's this person doing really cool shit on cable access TV in New York? And the fact that they dared to, like, do their art in a place that, it's not on a big platform necessarily, but they did it anyway. And aren't we so grateful that we have that, So for me, trans storytelling is so important. It's so important that we tell our stories because, I mean, especially from a Hollywood stance, I'll just say I've been in enough rooms where cis people are trying to dictate to me what a trans narrative is or saying, truly outrageous things. And mind you, what's I think more damaging is the fact that these people think of themselves as allies. That was the vibe because that is the vibe. And, it's like, we want to love these trans parents, but child, you are not trans. Your kid is trans. Your child, and that is it.
That is it. Yeah.
That is it. And we want to love you, but you need to fall back. Like, seriously, pass the mic.
Okay.
Know when it's your time to speak on it, and know when it, this is the difference between knowing when to be an advocate or an ally or an accomplice. And these people really, really don't understand. Your time for advocacy is not when I'm in the room. Your time for advocacy is when I am not in the room, not when I am in the room, because I could speak for myself, I could speak for my community, and that is why I'm fucking here. And guess what? I earned the right to be here because I worked my ass off fucking 5-10 times more than half of the people in this room. So that's real. Again, more reasons why we need to tell our own stories. Part of why we see such terrible representation in Hollywood. Hello, we are not in the writer's room. We are not the executive producers. We are not, the directors of this stuff. Oftentimes we're brought in last minute to consult. darling, you don't consult on my identity. That's insane, you
Yes.
know? And honestly, like I've talked to, because especially since the WGA strike, a lot of trans folks, it was a good time for us to get together and really think, how do we want to shape this business? Because we want to be here, but we know folks want our stories. We know that there are these gatekeepers. We know that these, you know, what do you call it? Acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions keep happening where you get these mega corporations and then all of a sudden they want to pull the plug on diversity and our shows are the first ones on the chopping block, and everyone's kind of sick of it. And so, it was a good time for us to really think and strategize. And so there's been, I'll just say there's been a lot of movement there, which I'm very happy about. But really, that thing of like, we have every right to tell our own stories. And, would you have like a story about Black characters and have a room of all white people in 2024? Hell no. So
You
why are you
shouldn't.
trying to do, right? You shouldn't. And,
Yeah.
and so I'll say this, that was like the norm, especially in the 90s, early odds. But today there's, been enough people to be like, no. And however, that same attitude doesn't apply to trans people for some reason. Cis people will think it's totally normal to have a room full of cis people, one token trans who has little to no power, and be like, let's tell a trans story. And you're like, why? So you can get the credit because you want an Emmy so badly?
Mm.
Because, it's not really about the community, it's about your ego and how you think, by doing this will get you clout. Like, no.
Yeah.
I think we're all done with that. We're all really done with that. So we gotta tell our own stories. We gotta do our own shit.
Yeah. Done with it and sick of it, to be honest with you.
Period.
I think
Period.
that and in a simpler version of my reasoning for telling our stories is because you don't know what you don't hear. And so
Mm-hmm.
and just like you said earlier about being in the information age, you can't say I don't know shit about trans people. No, you can go on Dem Boys website and it will be in this archive there for free. You don't need a subscription. You can pick any episode that you want. Just you can do a roulette. Okay, number 13 or whatever the episode is, and you can learn about a particular person in our stories. So you can't say that you don't know something if you're not looking in the right places to find it. And if we're not here sharing our stories, then we won't, you know what I mean? It's like it won't be found if we're not here sharing our stories. And I think I have a particular story. Back a few years ago, one of my friends, I call him my friend now, but we worked together. He was a new hire at my full-time job. And it was around the time, I don't remember the year, but it was around the time where the city of San Francisco was going back and forth about having gender neutral restrooms. And so
Mm-hmm.
this was long enough because he was reading about it in a newspaper. And like a newspaper, what the fuck is that anymore, right? And so he was in the break room alone, and I came in the break room. He was a new hire, so he had no idea that I had transitioned. He didn't know who I was. He just knew I
Mm.
was Sean. And so he
Mm-hmm.
was reading this article about the restroom. And he was like, and so he was frustrated. So he threw the newspaper on the table. Like, what's wrong with you? He was like, I don't understand why trans people need gender neutral restrooms. I was like, oh shit. I'm thinking to myself, universe, why you bring me in this situation? I just want to come here and eat my sandwich for lunch. Like I didn't want this. I didn't want this shit. Right. But I said I had to explain to him. And I said, well, to be honest with you, you don't know me. My name is Sean, but I transitioned such and such amount of years ago and I identify as trans
Mm.
masculine. He had no fucking idea. He was like, what?
So
And
he
so I had to
gagged.
explain to him the importance of how I said, and that might not necessarily be for me because I have this passing privilege and I can go into any restroom that I want. But for other trans folks, a binary restroom may not make them feel comfortable, and so going into
Mm.
a gender neutral one will. And we had this long conversation, right? I don't remember exactly what I said to him, but he was like, "Oh, thank you for explaining that to me. Now I understand." And from that moment,
Mm.
me and him became friends. And even outside of work, me and him
Aw.
became friends. So what I'm trying to say, long story short, is people don't know what they don't know until they know. Right. And if we're not here to provide the information or to give our sides of the story, people can say, oh, I don't know or I don't understand. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, I gotta say, props to you for having more success because I had a version of that went totally left when I was in Berlin. I'll just say it
uh,
shortly, but I was at the pub watching a soccer match and was sitting next to this, white cis straight guy who was Australian. And we were talking about a number of things, I talked about working in the business, and he asked me a lot of questions. And then somehow we got to talk about politics. And then he starts talking about how in Australia, because there's been obviously a lot of movement with trans rights stuff there too, he was just like, I just didn't think of myself as being, you know, more center left, but the discourse today, and I was like, oh, what do you mean? And then he launches into,
Oh
I
goodness.
don't get the trans thing. And mind you, I hadn't disclosed up until that point. And I was like, you know what? I got time. So, so and so, all of a sudden he's like, oh, I wish there was a better way to have dialogue. And he's just really, making trans people to be out as these hysterical, non intelligent, very erratic, fiery people. And I was like, well, I'm trans, and you're totally right. We should have more dialogue. Let's talk. Sean, this guy, boy oh boy, he was fighting tears the entire time. And it wasn't even like I was trying to like be this jerk about it, but he kept stating, but gender's a fact. It's a fact. And I was like, well, actually, like there's a lot of data and research and testimony that says that's not true. Like literally, all the, and I even was citing like documentaries and books and stuff, and he just kept coming back. But it's a fact. And like it was wild because he also started to project his toxic masculinity, insecurity shit onto me of like, you're getting really emotional. And mind you, he's like fighting tears with me and getting very extremely emotional. And I was like, actually, you're getting emotional. And also, what's wrong with getting emotional? You're literally talking about my personhood right now. um, yeah, he just had like a total meltdown. And I remember like after the moment, like I went home, I was staying with my friend Sven, and my friend Sven, he does like critical whiteness workshops in Germany. He's white and queer. And I was like, Sven, I don't know what the hell happened there. And like it was great because Sven was like, well, it's it. He kind of like explained to me because he's, just like that guy never thought he'd meet a trans person. Definitely not one who's working in Hollywood and killing it the way I am, like Ivy League and all that shit.
Yeah.
And like, it's just like, unfortunately, there's just like a lot of ignorant people out there. And I think especially for a lot of cis men, I think one thing Sven pointed out to me, which I didn't know, is like a lot of them never think about their gender ever because they have the privilege of not having to. Literally, the world was built for these people. So, and Sven explained to me for a lot of those guys, the only time they ever do think about gender is if they have a girlfriend or a wife or a daughter. And it's like, like that's the only time where you have to think about somebody who's like different from you.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Boys Inc. I am also the host of Dem Boys Podcast. As you may know, Dem Boys provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@themboys.org. That is HELLO at DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode.
And it was interesting too because my friend was explaining to me how also for a lot of those cis straight guys, there is a lot that they also have had to give up as far as gender or do, whether it's like stop crying, why was this guy coming at me about emotions when he was the one who was welling up with tears thinking, telling me gender is a fact when it's like obviously not. Like I'm living proof that like the gender binary is bullshit. And it's just like Sven was also explaining to me, it's like a lot of them they one never thought about it. Two, there's their own shame and emotions and stuff built up from their own like violent gender past, which a lot of us have. And it's like, because I think literally what we see is the emotion. It's all these people who are like completely emotionally unhinged, who are like, acting out of anger, spite, narcissism, egotism, just like all of this stuff. And it's like, where's the logic in any of that? you
Yeah,
know, if
yeah,
science is literally telling you all this stuff is made up and you're like telling me it's science, I'm like, well, clearly it's pseudoscience, wherever the hell you're getting your information from. No, for real. And the
yeah.
thing is like, and I will say my other friend who I consulted, my dear friend Helen, shout out to you, in Berlin, she was like, Sid, you own that guy. That's also what happened. Like, I didn't think of it as some sort of intellectual competition, but that's also, I mean, and I will say, actually, speaking about Brown Boy Project, one of the big things I had to learn or unlearn when we did Brown Boy was I was like one of those masculine people who was like really in denial about masculine privilege or even my biases around gender. And one of the big things I remember, do you remember how Cole had that sheet with like masculinity, things that are like considered masculine versus like feminine or like
Mm-hmm.
whatever? And I remember there was one about like um prioritizing or favoring logical rational reasoning versus intuition or emotions or even spiritual practice, that is oftentimes seen as like a feminine thing and it's like not seen as serious or real. And like, to see this guy try and use rationale, like logic, but it was bullshit. And for me to be like, actually, that isn't rational or logical or scientific. I think also like that guy went into like some toxic masculine tailspin about it and really lost his shit because I think he probably never thought he would have to have an actual debate with an actual trans person who would just be like, here's a fact, here's a fact, here's a statistic, here's more facts. Actually, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And mind you, I was trying to be kind because I was like, let's have a conversation. I was not raising my voice. I was being, very calm, almost like a second grade teacher. And still this guy like totally lost it. So who knows?
Kind of feel
Weird.
sorry for him though, hearing you talk about it, because it's like that's a hard role to upkeep, right? To be this cis white hetero person, like, and you don't have to see anything else but yourself. That's actually harder than they make it to be,
Hmm.
than somebody like us who is a person of color, trans, and we're living authentically in who we are, right? I mean, I feel like that's more easier than it is to uphold that cis normative lifestyle, right? It's like that's
Yeah.
hard. You can't cry, you can't show emotion, you can't do all this shit. Wait, what do you mean? Right? And I think of gender as being this just being fluid where you could do any of those things that you want. I was talking to somebody before on a show, on one of the episodes, and I told him I look good in pink, and his face turned. And I'm like, what the
Mm,
fuck? What's the face about? I like pink, being masculine. I can wear pink. What the fuck is wrong with me in pink, right? You ain't seen me in
mm.
a pink shirt. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's that fluidity. Like I could be, and I could be whatever. That was
Mm.
rigid um things
No,
that you're trying to
arbitrary
uphold. That's
rules.
yeah, that's hard work. Shit, that's hard. I feel sorry for you, right? So
Yeah, and also it's interesting you say pink because pink actually used to be a very masculine color. There
mm,
was like a shift. Yeah, I don't know the timing of this, but I feel like this is something lots of queer folks, like especially in the history area, bring up is like there was a shift. I mean, this happens all the time. This tells you how arbitrary it is. We
right,
constantly see figures from the past, whether it's like Louis XIV and his high heel shoes, and like
right.
all these people of the royal court who had that, and wigs or
Makeup
makeup,
and
just
yeah,
all this stuff. I mean, but I mean, to me that's proof of how it's not fixed. And
right.
obviously I think, especially, and it's interesting talking about this now that we're in this moment of change, of great change. I truly think, even though with this election year and everybody's kind of bracing for the worst, regardless of what the outcome is, because I feel like nobody's happy. Um, it is signifying we need something new. We need new ideas. We're sick
Yes,
of the old shit. Like
yes,
somebody, somewhere, free us from, because I get the sense like obviously gender is part of this, all of this identity politics stuff. I think all of this discussion that's happening in the world right now is part of a moment of change where, these things that, I mean, even talking to you about Sean, like, we're not that old, but like, I do, like, I was talking to a friend today, a trans friend, about how I felt like when I came in as a lesbian in the early aughts, even the LGBT community, it was very segmented. You stayed in your lane with your letter, I mean,
Yes.
biphobia is still really big,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
but it especially was vicious, then of like, oh, you're greedy or you're double dipping or whatever the hell people would say.
Or
And
make up your
we're
mind or any of that other shit.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
I
did
just
make up my mind. I like them both. What the fuck?
hello. It just grosses me out that we like lived through that time
Yeah.
period, even
Yeah.
as queer folks.
Yeah.
But whereas today it's way more fluid. Like
Mm.
when I talk to the Gen Zers, I'm just like, they're so way more progressive queer. And actually, for me, coming back to the U.S. from Europe, they're more aligned with the politic of people I came up around when I was in Berlin, because I feel like, as far as my story goes, Berlin was a very, very crucial. I mean, it's always a home base for me of like the many places I've lived in the world, but because it's so queer and radical and progressive with its politics, it was this like a kind of incubation ground for me in terms of like building my core values and my worldview in many many ways. And I feel like there's more of that queer critical eye progressiveness that I see with the Gen Zers compared to even like millennials and up, which is kind of nice. So to me, that signifies change is coming. It's on its way.
Yes. I hope to be alive to see it. Definitely.
Same.
Yeah. Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bos Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium. Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. Before I get into this part, I just want to say, Sid, just your presence and what you brought to this episode, I really appreciate it. And
Oh,
I have no words for it. It's just a utter appreciation, and I thank you for being a guest.
oh,
And so
thank
this is the
you.
part of the show where I like to ask my guests a random question. I have a list of questions. They're always growing. I have 40 questions now.
Oh, I love this. Oh my God, 40 questions. This is so
So
intense. I love it. All
so
right,
pick a
let's
number
go.
between 1 and 40. And the question may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about today. So pick a number and I'll read you that question.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, I'm gonna say, and I'll give the reason why, number seven. But
Okay.
it's only because I saw a clip of Mbappe. Do you know him? He's like the
No.
hot shit as far. Okay, I'm deep in my soccer bag right now. It's a long story.
Okay.
He is like truly, I think people are saying probably like the best player in the world right now, but
Hmm.
he just got traded to Real Madrid, which is like a very, very
Oh,
big deal. He is number seven. Let's hear number seven.
all right. Number 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Ah, oh my gosh. Wow. What a great. Favorites. Damn. We're only doing one?
I mean, you can throw out as many as you need to.
Okay, because like my brain immediately went to Dexter's Laboratory.
Oh,
That was,
okay.
I know, I know. Also had a very queer character, trans. Remember him who wore the like high heels and had
Oh,
that what do you call it? That like Renaissance era ruffled collar
yes,
neck would be
yes.
like, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I know it's kind of funny. I've talked to a lot of queer trans friends. Actually, also my extravaganza brother Maximo was that character once for Halloween, which
Oh, wow.
and they got those pumps and all that other stuff too. So yeah, Dexter's Lab comes to mind. My brain also went to Sailor Moon. I
Okay.
was really into Sailor Moon, specifically Sailor Mars, Chef's Kiss. I mean, I'm an Aries. She spoke to my spirit. She would get pissed off and throw fireballs at people and, clean the temple with her uncle. And then also just growing up, I loved like when I was really little, I used to watch like all the Looney Tunes. So like
Oh,
stuff like
yes.
Bugs Bunny and Tom and Jerry. It's so weird saying that because it really dates us now. Because
Yeah,
I
a little
feel like
bit.
because the kids today just watch all the Disney like Frozen and all that kind of stuff or whatever. But back then, and actually even saying that to you, okay, this is me really being a historian. Did you know? Bugs Bunny is really like a character of like um African diasporic lore. Like that is
Oh, I didn't know that.
like he's the trickster character, which you often see in like West African tales, and
Oh,
specifically Brer Rabbit. That's who he is. Brer Rabbit.
yes, I
The
do.
we all, yeah.
Yes.
So Brer Rabbit, this rabbit who gets into trouble and finds his way out of it, but then we learn the like moral of the story kind of stuff. I mean, that is where Bugs Bunny
I
comes
had no
from.
idea. Thank you for
Really?
educating me. I'm
Oh,
serious. I did not know. And I used to
yeah.
like Brer Rabbit, so I didn't know that there was a connection there. So, shit.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff, especially from like minstrelsy or, Black traditions, they end up in theater and TV and film over time. I mean, also like Mickey Mouse. I mean, the fact that these characters also, particularly the fact that they're wearing white gloves, this is like a reference to the vaudeville era and vaudeville coming from minstrelsy and,
Hmm.
this idea of like the stage performers. Yeah, like,
I
people would always ask that question, why are the characters always wearing gloves? Well, the gloves are front like a reference to that era of like stage, theatricality in America in that particular
did not know that.
space.
I did not
Yeah,
know
because
that.
really what happens in the early 20th century is a lot of the stuff that was happening in circus, carnival, theater, gilly, like lower level theater circuits, not necessarily like Broadway, but that, like Chitlin circuits, whatever. This is what ends up in TV and film as those like avenues really emerge in the early 20th century, right? Like radio gets bigger, TV really becomes a thing after the 50s, and film was really taking off in the early 20th century. And so you see sort of, this is how you get like Bojangles tap dancing with Shirley Temple. Well, people were tap dancing all around America before then, just in carnivals and circuses and gillies. And, it was just a matter of time before it ended up on film. So the fact that the adaptation of these things in cartoons is with that time period too.
I mean, as a child, I didn't think about none of that. So, what I
I
mean? You
know.
just like, oh, I resonate with this character and I like it. I just really didn't. I didn't even think about that. Thank you for educating us on that.
Yeah, he even wears drag. Actually, one last thing I'll say. Remember when he's Brunhilde? Remember when they do the Ride of the Valkyries and he's wearing the Viking hat and he's on like a horse and
Bugs
stuff.
Bunny?
Have you? Yeah. There's a Bugs Bunny where because they would it's the one with da, 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 da,
Yes, yes,
da, da.
yes.
Yeah, that's Wagner. First of all,
Uh,
Ride of the Valkyries. Um, and that's also part of the whole trickster drag, all of this stuff comes from like minstrelsy, or like that's one of the early roots of gender blending in America or gender bending.
hmm.
And like it's part of the tradition of this type of theater. So again, it's like being adapted into this animated form. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, is just like how deep Black American, specifically African diasporic
Mm.
culture is in American, what we consider United States American culture. Um, like it goes so deep that you're not even aware that it's a Black
Right.
thing per se.
Right.
And I don't know. To me, that's like one of the things that's truly fascinating about studying U.S. history in this kind of way. It's kind of fun. It's like a little Scooby Doo moments where you're just like, and it turns
Uh-huh.
out what's
Yeah.
behind this incredible cultural phenomenon is Black people. Look at that.
Oh, you don't
Welcome.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to America. Rock and roll. Who invented this?
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. Did you see the Little Richard documentary? It
No,
came
I
out
have not.
recently.
No, I have not.
Highly recommend. Very
Okay.
good.
Will do.
Yes. I mean, true. Because like especially Little Richard was one of those people. I feel like you saw at least growing up. I feel like he had a resurgence in the '90s and stuff. Everything he did, the antics, the jumping off of pianos, the smashing, the jumping into the crowd, all of things that we associate with being a big artist on a big stage in a rock and roll way. That's Little Richard. And
Mm-hmm.
like this documentary really gagged me because it's like, yeah, I knew he contributed to the genre, but I didn't realize what we literally consider to be like rock and roll, the culture, the art form, not the music for sure, but then also just like everything around it, the glittery outfits. He was a pioneer. He was when he was doing that before everybody else. And he was a Black gay man. Like, what the hell?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm gonna
how did
check that
how
out.
yeah, it'll really, I don't know, it'll and also actually, and minor, this isn't like major spoiler, but like if he trained all those white guys from the UK who were obsessed with him, the Beatles, the Who, like they were studying Little Richard, you know
Now
and
that I
like
knew.
they were. But that's the thing, and he also
Yeah.
taught them. Like he
Yeah.
personally, I didn't know he personally taught them. I knew all those white British dudes were very inspired, whatever, whatever. But I didn't realize he personally taught them, and that really made me go, wow. Like I know Tina Turner because Tina Turner. I don't know if you saw her doc, also beautiful, highly recommend. um, you know, Mick Jagger, she taught Mick Jagger how to dance. Like all,
Hmm.
again, all this stuff, it's Black culture. And I say that too, as somebody who lived in Europe, somebody who's lived abroad in the United States, we don't appreciate enough our cultural history. We don't appreciate enough the contribution of African Americans, of Black Americans to what we consider American culture. This is a problem
Hmm.
because the reality is, the shade is like, again, in that Scooby Doo way, you don't even have to look that deep. We're there, you
So,
know.
are you meaning
No, no,
appreciation from Americans in general, white Americans or Black Americans?
all of the above. I don't think
Mm,
people really recognize just like how much. Because, and I say that because oftentimes, what guys, the Europeans will sometimes know more shit than we do
mm, mm,
because they really study this shit because they treat it like it's culture that should
mm,
be valued
mm,
and anointed and celebrated and studied and discussed. And obviously, it's because the way they do culture there is obviously in many ways different. But the fact that they see it as equally important to know, who Sister Rosetta Thorpe is because she really was foundational to the electric guitar and rock and roll. Like
mm.
they'll name check that shit. And I'm not talking everybody, but still like more than folks here sometimes know. And um that's obviously part of why I do this work on ballroom history. Is to me, it's like we need to know our own history. We need to do our own research. We also like need folks to understand this isn't like a flash in the pan moment. These aren't, like
Yeah,
this is something that's serious that should be taken seriously. So,
absolutely.
all the better.
Yeah. So, Sydney, is there any last minute advice or words of wisdom you'd like to share to folks that are listening?
Oh my gosh. Wow, this is a great words of wisdom. Last minute advice. All right, listen up.
Listen up.
Bet on yourself.
Mm.
Bet on yourself because you have done so much. And I know that for folks who listen to your pod, like, especially for trans folks, we have been through so much. We go through so much. And I think for me in my transition journey, I talked about my time at the University of Pennsylvania, where I think what was really hard for me having to stomach, and mind you, that was my sound return. It was a very big ego death moment for me. But what was really unfortunate was just seeing how people who I thought were allies or I thought supported all Black people, but it clearly was no, only some, not the trans ones, only the cis ones, only the straight heteronormative ones. Um, I remember, I don't think I really, I'll be honest, I don't think I had self doubt. If anything, what bothered me was I was confused as to why these people were discriminating against me. I was confused as to why they were so bigoted because I was like, it's me. Like, what did I do? I literally have this like huge ass resume. Why is that a problem for? Oh, you're having a transphobic meltdown. Oh, like you've never thought about your gender before. I'm not even talking about gender. I'm talking about old people that I talk to in New York City. It has nothing to do with genitals or sexuality, and somehow you're making it about that because you're ignorant as fuck. Like, what am I going to do with this? And I remember when I was pivoting out of academia and trying to pivot into Hollywood, I was nervous because like I don't know anybody in the space. This seems like such a highfalutin goal, right? Like sometimes we psych ourselves out. Who do you think you are, right? Who am I to want to dream so big? Everybody wants to work in Hollywood. Sid, why do you think you'd make it? But I did it anyway, and I bet on myself. And a lot of that was like I'll never forget. There was this art historian. I'm not going to name names, we'll just say this woman who had really convinced me to do the PhD at Penn. Her pitch to me was, well, the three best things about being an academic are June, July, and August. I'm like, obviously looking back, if the three best things about your job are not working at your job, probably not a good job. Maybe you should get a new profession if really the highlight of your profession is not doing your profession, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, to be fair, I will be honest, like when I looked, especially at the Black professors, I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not turning into any of you zombies. Like I always had this running joke with my friend Dorothy that, I was dying to get into Penn, but it was really like get out. Like I needed to get out because it was so dark and, whatever. But I remember when I told that lady when I knew I was leaving the PhD and I just wanted to hear, her last, she had any last things to say to me. And her words to me, remember, she was like, well, what are you going to do?
Hmm.
And it really was like, who do you think you are? This is the pinnacle of your life. You're in an Ivy.
Hmm.
You're doing a PhD. Like, and I remember looking at her like, bitch, read my fucking resume. I know who the fuck I am. Do you? Clearly not. Obviously, I kept it cute because, that's me. But I do remember going like, look at my resume, bitch. I've done so much. What makes you think I couldn't do even more? Get the fuck out of here. And you know what? One thing I'll say for sure, Sean, Ballroom taught me that. Ballroom taught me not to accept anything less than what I'm actually worth. If I didn't have this community, I swear to you, there is no world. I would have let these little basic academic, gumshoes crush me. But I knew who I was and I knew what I had done. And I was like, bitch, if you don't see it for me, then poo poo for you, because I know there's like a ton of people who will, and obviously gag a year and a half later, bitch, I'm a co-EP on a show that literally is killing it. So it was just kind of like, bet on yourself. Don't listen
Yes.
to the haters. Let them be your motivators. Pay them no mind. Pay them dust because that is what they are worth. Little people do little things.
Yeah.
big people doing big things.
That's
Like,
right.
just
Bet on
be clear
yourself.
about, yeah, be clear about where you want to be and who you actually are, you know?
Exactly. Tens across
So,
the board when you bet on yourself.
period.
Period. Hey, Sydney, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really loved having you here and I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate you and thank you so much for doing this work. Honestly, it is super important and it's not just for the folks today, but I'm telling you, it's the folks 10 years, 20 years, 100 years from now, 200 years from now who will listen and hear the voices of the folks who are on the ground. So the work you're doing is monumental and I'm so grateful that you're doing it. Thank you so much.
So we have reached the end of this episode. I want to say thank you for listening to Dem Boys Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. Be sure to visit our website at demboys.org. That is DEMBOIS.org. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think you would be a great guest on the show, or if you know somebody you think would be a great guest on the show, there's multiple ways to request to be a guest on the show. First is you can go visit our Instagram page, click the link in our bio, and from there you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Or you can visit our website, click the programs tab up top, scroll down to podcast, click the podcast button, and from there on the podcast page, you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Yo, we need questions, y'all. If you have those burning questions, a question that you want to ask me or a future guest on the show, there's multiple ways that you can send in questions, right? So first, you can go to Instagram, DM us that question, or you can email us at hello@demboys.org. That's HELLO, like hi, at demboys.org. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share this show out with your friends and other folks in your networks. So until next time, take care. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You have just finished listening to the 8th episode in a row. After every 8 episodes, Dem Boys Podcast takes a month-long break to relax, rejuvenate, and to prepare for the next batch of 8 episodes. So for listeners, this is a great time to go back and re-listen to episodes that you may love and enjoy. Also, it may be a good time to go back and listen to episodes that you may have missed. So also, during this break, be sure to like the podcast. Be sure to share the podcast out with folks in your networks. Also, if you like an episode or if there's an episode that interests you that maybe you have not listened to, if you click on the episode description, you will be able to find out more information about the guests who appeared on that episode. Also, you'll be able to click and to read the transcripts for each episode so you can follow verbatim every word that was said throughout the episode. To maybe you might want to reflect on something that was said or something that really resonated with you and you would like to not only listen to it but also read it. I hope that you like the show. I hope that you listen to more episodes coming up. We have new guests, new topics, new subjects, new everything. So I hope that you enjoy and see you on the next 8 episodes.